The fire had already gone out. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the silence, not the cold creeping through the stone floor, not even the figure standing at the far end of the hall, like a shadow that had forgotten how to move. The fire was out, and in the eternal court, the sacred hearth had not gone dark in 400 years. She was on her knees before she understood why. Not out of submission. Her knees had simply given. The woman on the throne was watching her with the kind of stillness that doesn't belong to the living, the kind that belongs to something that has watched civilizations crumble and found them, ultimately, unimpressive. "You came," the queen said. Her voice had no echo. In a hall of white stone, it should have echoed. It didn't. "I was brought," the girl answered. Her voice shook. She hated that it shook. For a moment, just a moment, something moved across the face of the immortal queen. Something that might have been recognition, or grief, or the shadow of a decision already made long before this girl had been born. "Yes," the queen said softly. "You were." Then she looked at the man standing to her left, the one who had not spoken, had not moved, had watched the girl on the floor with an expression that the court had never seen on his face before and would spend the next century arguing about. "Kalindra," the queen said. "Tell her what she is." The man said nothing. The fire stayed dark, and the girl, mortal, trembling, 23 years old in a world where 23 was nothing, was barely a breath, looked up at him and felt, with the certainty of someone who has nothing left to lose, that whatever came next would destroy her completely. She was right, but she was also wrong about what destruction meant. Her name was Maren, not a beautiful name, not a name from legend or prophecy. Her mother had chosen it because it meant sea in an old language nobody spoke anymore, and her mother had loved the sea the way people love things they have never seen, completely and uselessly. Her mother had died when Maren was 9. That was the first wound, not the loudest one, but the one that had never closed, the way some cuts never fully heal, leaving a line of thinner skin that aches when the weather changes. Maren had grown up in a village on the edge of what the maps called the Dawnwood, which the people who lived near it called the place where the trees don't sleep. It was not a warm name. It was not meant to be. She had been raised by her uncle, a man who was not unkind but who was deeply, constitutionally distracted, kept bees, wrote letters nobody answered, loved Maren in the way people love things they didn't choose, honestly, with occasional resentment and a constant low-level bewilderment. She had learned not to need much from him. That was the second wound, the one that looked like independence. Maren had grown up understanding, with the bone-deep clarity of children who learn early, is that she was not the kind of person things happened to. She was the kind of person who watched, who stayed, who managed. The village needed someone to keep records, and she learned to write. The village healer grew too old to climb the ridge alone, and Maren learned the plants. The miller's daughter needed someone to sit with her through a difficult winter, and Maren sat. She was useful. She was reliable. She was, in the specific and devastating way of people who have made themselves indispensable to everyone except themselves, completely alone. She had one friend. His name was Tobias, 15 years older, with the rough hands of a man who spent his life trying to hold things together. A widower, terrible soup, the most honest person she had ever known, which was a comfort and a problem, because Tobias had a habit of saying true things gently, the way a surgeon might work. "You disappear yourself," he'd told her the autumn she turned 20. They were sitting on the low wall outside his house watching the dawnwood go gold. "Someone needs something and you fold yourself smaller. I've watched you do it for years." She had laughed. She was good at laughing at things that hurt. "Someone has to," she said. "Why you?" She didn't have an answer. 3 years later, she still didn't. What she had instead was a list of small convictions. That she was not remarkable. that remarkable things did not happen in places like this, and that this was fine. Not something she thought about in the dark when the night was long, and the dawn would breathe through the trees, and she lay awake feeling unfinished, somehow. Like a sentence that stops before, like something waiting for a word it doesn't know yet. She was 23 when the riders came. Not soldiers, not merchants. Something else, the way they held themselves, the quality of their stillness in the saddle, the horses that moved with a silence that horses shouldn't have. They came through the village at first light. 2 of them silver-haired and pale-eyed and old, in the way that has nothing to do with age. They asked for her by name. Maren, who was standing at the well, who had been doing nothing more consequential than pulling up water for the morning, felt the world she had built, small, reliable, invisible, tilt under her feet like a table with one short leg. "I'm Maren," she said. One of them looked at her with something she couldn't read. "We know," he said. "That's why we're here." They didn't explain much on the road. She learned quickly that direct questions were met with answers that were technically true and practically useless. "Where are we going?" "To the Eternal Court." "Why?" "You have been requested." "By whom?" "The Queen." "Why would the Queen request me?" A long pause. "It is not our place to say." She had heard of the Eternal Court the way everyone near the Dawnwood had, in fragments, in warnings, in the tone adults used for things they hoped children would never need to know. It existed inside the oldest part of the forest, where the trees were so ancient they had stopped looking like trees and started looking like intention. By the second day, the quality of light changed. Cooler, more deliberate. The road had no ruts from wheels. Nobody brought wheels here. The Dawnwood smelled like a memory. Cool stone and old rain and something floral she couldn't name. Sweet in a way that felt almost sad. She asked one of the riders about it. "Pine lila," he said. "They only bloom when there has been grief." She looked at the trees. There were flowers everywhere. They arrived at the court on the morning of the 3rd day. And Maren, who had prepared herself for grandeur, was undone by something quieter. The way everything there held its breath. White stone that had never known quarry marks. Arches that curved like questions. And everywhere, the sense of time behaving differently. Running slower, settling like sediment. She was brought to the throne room before food, before rest. Still untangling her braid when the doors opened. Disheveled and blinking and 23. And none of it mattered because the moment she crossed the threshold, the fire went out. The Queen was everything Maren had expected. Ageless, terrible, beautiful in the way of things that are also dangerous. She sat on a throne that didn't look designed for sitting. It looked designed for enduring. And to her left, stood a man who Maren understood immediately. With no context, no introduction, no warning, was the most dangerous thing in the room. Not because he looked dangerous. He was tall, silver-haired like the riders, dressed in something dark. His face was the kind of composed that takes centuries to learn. But his eyes, when they met hers, for just a moment before he looked away, were doing something his face wasn't. Something raw. Something she would have called familiar if that were a word that made any sense here. "This is Kalindra," the Queen said. "My son." And then to him, "Tell her what she is." A silence stretched through the hall like a wire pulled too tight. Kalindra, and the name settled into her mind like a stone into water, disturbing things, sending rings out. Did not look at his mother when he answered. He looked at Maren. "She is the last surviving daughter of House Evanth," he said. His voice was quiet, precise. The voice of someone being careful, a human bloodline that swore a binding oath to this court 4 generations ago. The oath requires a daughter," the Queen finished, "for the right of binding. To seal the accord between our people and the mortal settlements that border our forest." She paused. "All other daughters of the line have died. which leaves you. Maren became aware slowly that her mouth had opened. I'm a… what? Mortal, the queen agreed, as if that were what she'd said. Fully, irreversibly, and required. Required for what exactly? The queen looked at her son. Kilindras looked at the floor. A contract of binding, he said finally. Old law. A union. Formal. Witnessed. Sealed in this court. Between the heir of House of Venth and the heir of the eternal throne. He paused. Something in him was working very hard. Between a mortal and an elf. Between a life that ends and one that doesn't. The fire in the great hearth was still out. Maren's knees hit the floor. She didn't go down in grief. She went down in the specific sudden understanding of someone who has just seen the full shape of a thing and found it enormous. 4 generations. A promise someone made before she was born. A contract written in a world she had never been part of, binding her to a future she had never imagined. And the man who would be her husband, this prince, this ancient, this person whose face had done something her ribcage didn't know how to process, was still looking at the floor, as if he couldn't bear to watch her understand. What does it mean, she thought, that the thing you never asked for has already been decided? What does it mean to have a destiny that was inherited, not earned? What does it mean to be chosen, and to have no idea whether the person doing the choosing had any choice at all? They gave her a room that looked more like a held breath than a bedroom. White stone, no dust. A window onto a courtyard where water moved through floor channels in patterns too deliberate to be decorative. A bed with coverings the color of early morning. Everything immaculate and impersonal in the way of spaces never truly inhabited. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time and did not cry. She had gotten good over the years at saving that for the dark. Crying in front of people felt like handing them something. A woman came with food. Elven, silver-haired, silent, set the tray down, inclined her head, left before Maren could thank her. The food was unfamiliar and extraordinary, something that tasted like autumn, something warm and sweet without a name. She ate all of it. She'd learned young that you eat when food is available. Then she sat with her empty tray and thought, what now? She didn't wait long for an answer. The knock at her door was soft, as if whoever was behind it were uncertain whether sound should be permitted here. She opened it and found a girl. And she thought girl because the face was young, though she had already learned that youth of face meant nothing in this place. With eyes the green of deep water, and hands clasped in front of her with the air of someone performing calm they didn't quite feel. I am Sarael, the girl said. I have been assigned to help you acclimate. To what? Maren asked. Sarael considered this. To everything, she said. It's a considerable list. She turned out to be the most honest person Maren had met since Tobias, which was either a relief or a warning and possibly both. As she walked Maren through the outer corridors of the court, the public ones, she was careful to specify, there were parts she could not yet go. She answered questions with a directness that felt almost aggressive. How old are you? Maren asked. 212. And you look 17 by mortal reckoning. Yes. A pause. You will notice that in the court. Everything looks like one thing and is another, including the people. Sarael glanced at her sideways, especially the people. The court was vast in a way that didn't entirely feel architectural, as if the space between rooms was larger than the rooms themselves, as if distance here operated by different rules. Maren saw Elven in groups, speaking in low voices that stopped when she passed. She felt their attention like a change in temperature, not hostile precisely, something more complicated than hostile. Watching, she thought. They're all watching. They know who you are, Sarael said, reading something in her expression. They know what the binding means. Most of them are, she paused, choosing. Most of them have opinions. I imagine they don't love the idea of their prince marrying a mortal. Sarael made a sound that might have been a very controlled laugh. Some of them love it less than others. The Lady Thessienne has been particularly vocal. She's been at court for 6 centuries and she has... A pause. Expectations. Maren filed this away. A rival, then. Of course. And the prince, she asked. She kept her voice level. Does he have opinions? Sarael was quiet long enough that Maren looked over. He has not spoken about it, Sarael said carefully. To anyone. Not since the Queen announced the binding would proceed. When was that? 6 months ago. 6 months. 6 months of silence on something this enormous. Maren turned that over. He had known. Long before she had. He had known. And he had said nothing to anyone and looked at no one and, according to the carefully neutral language of a 200-year-old who was very deliberately not editorializing, felt something about it that he'd chosen, or been forced, to bury. She wondered what that felt like, to carry something for 6 months and never set it down. She was still wondering when she turned a corner and walked directly into him. He caught her, hands on her shoulders, automatic, steadying, then released her so quickly it was almost as if he hadn't. They stood 3 feet apart and the corridor felt smaller than it had. My lord, Sarael said behind Maren. Sarael. Then to Maren, you're exploring. Being explored, she said before she decided to. There's a distinction. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, the precursor to one. The movement in a face before it decides whether to permit the thing. Are you comfortable? He asked. No, she said. I'm completely bewildered and nothing smells like I expect. And I haven't processed any of what happened this morning. A pause. I'll try to ask better questions, he said. Then he was gone, walking away with the precision of someone who made a habit of leaving before things became something they couldn't manage. Maren stood in the corridor and felt, layered beneath the bewilderment and grief and strangeness, something small and bright and dangerous. Curiosity. What, she thought, is he afraid of? If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. And leave a comment telling me what you're feeling right now. I want to know. The first week was careful. Kalindra appeared at meals. He sat at the far end of whatever table she occupied, made no conversation, but didn't leave before she arrived. Sarael said this was significant. Significant how? Maren asked, picking apart something that looked like bread and tasted like starlight, which she was learning was not a metaphor. He could take his meals privately, Sarael said. He almost always did, before her. That was the unspoken word at the end of every Sarael sentence. She learned the court by watching. She learned that the Lady Thessienne, cold, architectural at court 6 centuries, walked past her door each morning too slowly, always glancing. She learned the sacred hearth had gone dark when she entered, and the last time it did was the day the old king died. She learned there was a garden called the Garden of the Second Moon that nobody entered, and Sarael went blank when she asked. She learned that Kalindra stood on the eastern balcony at dawn, always with the same book, every morning, as if looking for something in it that kept not being there. What does he read? She asked Sarael. Sarael looked at her with the expression that meant, I have decided to answer carefully. A record, historical, letters between the court and the human settlements during the time of the First Accord, during the time of House Event. She felt that settle. Her family, her bloodline. 4 generations of letters in a book an immortal prince read every morning at dawn. She had grown up without family, and now she apparently had enough family history to fill a book someone else loved. The emotion that rose in her was so complicated she had to put it down and walk away from it. On the 9th day, he came to the library when she was there. She had found it on day 4, a room the size of a village, shelves that went higher than any ceiling had a right to, books that sometimes hummed, a quality of quiet that felt intentional, as if silence here were not the absence of sound but a presence. She'd been spending most of her free time in it since, reading everything she could find about the binding and finding much less than she wanted. He chose a chair at the other end of her table. There were other tables, and read. She watched him a moment, then went back to her own book. 40 minutes of comfortable silence. Then, "You're not reading the book in front of you." She startled. He hadn't looked up. "I am," she said. "You've been on the same page for 20 minutes." He turned his own page. "You're thinking." People can think and read simultaneously. Not when the thinking is this loud. She looked at him. He looked at his book. "What is the rite of binding?" she asked. "Not the official version, the real one." Now he looked up. She had been reluctantly admitting this to herself, extraordinarily beautiful in the way of things that have been a long time becoming. Refined, distilled, like metal worked until only what's essential remains. He didn't look like a painting. He looked like an answer to a question you'd stopped expecting. She looked away first. "It's old magic," he said. "A bond between a mortal life and an elven one. Deeper than marriage as mortals understand it. The mortal's life force becomes bound to the elven partner, as long as the accord holds." "And what does that mean for the mortal?" A pause. "The mortal does not age as quickly, does not die as quickly." He paused. "But they are still mortal. The binding slows. It does not stop." She looked at her hands. "So I live longer than a normal human life, but I still—" "Yes." "Very quiet. You still." She thought about that, about what it means to be given more time and not in the end be changed into something that doesn't end. "And you?" she asked. "What does it mean for you?" He was quiet long enough that she looked up. His face had done the thing it did when he forgot to control it. He looked, for just a moment, like someone standing at the edge of something enormous. "I will outlive you," he said, "by centuries." The silence that followed had weight, texture. "That's what the court objects to," she said, "not the marriage, that you'll grieve one." He said nothing, which was its own answer. She thought of the pine lily. They only bloom when there has been grief. The flowers had been everywhere when she arrived. "Did anyone ask you?" she said. "Before the 6 months? Before they came for me? Did anyone ask what you wanted?" His jaw tightened. "Did anyone ask you?" "No. Nobody had." "No," she said. "No," he echoed. They sat with that, the shared outrage of it, the strange comfort of being equally wronged. Then she said, "What's in the garden of the second moon?" And his face closed. A door shutting. "Nothing that concerns you," he said. "Professional. Precise." She filed that away. "Everything concerns me now." 3 weeks in, the Lady Thessian requested a private meeting. Maren accepted. Refusing people who disliked you gave them time to dislike you more effectively. Thessian received her in rooms 3 times the size of Maren's, decorated with things chosen because they mattered, not because they matched. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with warmth, and immediately, evidently, very intelligent. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Most mortals who arrive at court are dazzled." "I'm dazzled," Maren said. "I'm also paying attention." Thessiani looked at her for a long moment. "He loved someone once," she said. "Flat. Factual. Before the accord. A mortal. 300 years ago." Maren kept her face calm. "She died. They all die. It destroyed him in ways this court has spent 3 centuries managing." A pause. "The binding was not the Queen's idea. It was his. He offered it to make the accord permanent, because he had already decided that if he was going to grieve again, he would do it for a reason." She let that settle. "I am not telling you this to be cruel. I am telling you because I am old, and I have no patience for things proceeding badly when they could proceed honestly." Something almost like compassion moved through her face. "You are not a person to him yet. You are a solution. A deliberate wound he designed to matter for the right reasons this time." I thought you should know what you were walking into." Maren walked back to her room very slowly. She thought about what it meant to be chosen for grief, to be loved, preemptively, as a kind of answer to an old question. Can I survive it again? To be placed in someone's life as an intentional repetition of something that had broken them. She did not know whether that was the loneliest thing she had ever heard, or the most honest form of love she had ever encountered. She suspected it was both. She stood at her window and looked at the garden she wasn't allowed into, and thought about a man who had loved someone mortal 3 centuries ago, and about flowers that bloomed in grief, and about the fact that she was still here, still alive, still 23, and that, underneath all the confusion and the fear and the strangeness, she had never in her life felt more like she was exactly where something enormous was about to happen. The letter arrived on a morning that already felt wrong. Sarael brought it, not with her usual quiet efficiency, but with something held back behind her eyes, something she was working very hard to keep off her face. She set it on the table and did not explain, and did not stay, which was itself the explanation. It was addressed to Maren in handwriting she didn't recognize, old handwriting, the kind that had been formed in an era when people learned to write as a serious discipline. Every letter considered, it was from the Queen. Not delivered by the Queen's hand, not announced, slipped under the protocol of proper communication, like something that needed to not be seen. Maren of House Aventh, there is something you do not know. There is something my son does not know that I have decided, in the interest of what is right rather than what is expedient, to tell you both. Come to the garden of the second moon at nightfall. Come alone. I will tell you who you are. She read it twice. Then she sat down. Then she stood back up. Who you are, not what you are, not the duty, not the obligation. Who? She thought about her mother, who had loved the sea and never seen it. She thought about her uncle's distracted love. She thought about Tobias and his honest surgeon's tongue, and the way he'd said you disappear yourself. And she thought about how she had spent 23 years believing herself to be ordinary, specifically deliberately ordinary, a person to whom nothing remarkable would happen. And she thought about riders appearing at a well at first light. She thought, what if ordinary was never the truth of me? The day passed with the slowness of days that have something terrible waiting at the end of them. She ate dinner without tasting it. Sarael watched her with those carefully quiet eyes and didn't ask. The court watched her, as it always did, but with a different quality tonight. More careful, more deliberate, as if people had been told to watch. Someone had been talking. She found the garden just before nightfall. The entrance was narrow, 2 pillars of dark stone with ivy between them. The ivy flowering in pale blue that she recognized now as pine lily. Grief flowers, scattered through the leaves like small lights. The garden itself was not what she had imagined. She had expected grandeur. What she found was intimacy. Small, closed in by old trees, with stone benches and a single fountain that moved without sound, and a quality of light that came from nowhere in particular, and went everywhere. The Queen was already there, without the throne, without the court, without the formal arrangement of power. She was still formidable, but differently so, like a mountain in cloud versus a mountain in clear air. The scale was the same, but the shape was more visible. Sit, the Queen said. Maren sat. Your mother, the Queen began, was not from the village. Maren went very still. She was born here, the Queen said, in this court, to a woman of the Elven who fell in love with a mortal man and followed him out of the wood 400 years ago when— Wait, Maren said. The Queen paused. My mother, Maren said carefully, was human. Yes, the Queen said. By the time she was born, she was. That is how it works after several generations. The Elven blood dilutes, or retreats, becomes something that looks human, and lives human, and dies as humans do. She looked at Maren with something enormous in her face. But it does not disappear. And it does not stop mattering to us. Maren's hands were cold. The binding was not invented to seal the accord, the Queen said. That was the story we told the court. It is true that the accord needed sealing. But the binding itself, that specific magic, that specific rite, is older. It is what my people do when we recognize someone who carries our blood in a diluted line. We bring them home. A pause. We give them back what was lost. You're telling me, Maren said slowly, that I have elven ancestry. I am telling you, the Queen said, that you are my granddaughter. The fountain continued moving in silence. The pine lily bloomed everywhere, and Maren understood, with the absolute cold clarity of someone who has just watched their entire understanding of themselves quietly shatter, why the sacred fire had gone out when she entered the throne room. It had recognized her. It had done what fire does in this court when someone of the blood comes home. She had come home. She had never known she'd left. My son, the Queen said, and her voice was the most human it had been. Careful, almost fragile, does not know. The binding, the choice to bind himself to you specifically, was his. He reviewed the lineages. He chose House Aventh. He does not know that House Aventh chose from us. She looked at Maren. I did not tell him because I did not know if you would come, if you would stay, because knowing would change things for him in ways I could not predict. And he has already been changed enough by things I could not predict. The woman he loved, Maren said, 300 years ago. The Queen closed her eyes. Her name was Ava. The Queen said, she was the daughter of House Aventh's founder. She was the first one who carried our blood outward into the mortal world. She opened her eyes. My son loved her. He let her go because she chose to go. He has been living in the particular way of someone who gave something enormous and never got to know if it mattered. Maren thought about the book he read every morning, the letters between the court and House Aventh, love letters, not historical documents, love letters. He needs to know, Maren said. Yes, the Queen agreed. And when he finds out that he chose me not knowing what I am, that the blood he loved left this court and came back in me. She stopped. Her voice was doing something. How will he know it's not just that he's not just repeating? The Queen finished softly. How will I know, Maren said, whether I am someone he sees or a ghost he recognizes? The garden was very quiet. That, the Queen said, is the question I cannot answer for you. She did not go to him that night. She walked back to her room in stunned quiet, her footsteps careful as if the knowledge of her own blood had changed the weight of her body. Maybe it had. She was not who she thought she was, had never been. The ordinary girl, the useful girl, the invisible one, all built on a foundation she'd never known was there. A story that had started here and gone out into the world and come back to her like a tide. She had spent her whole life feeling unfinished. She understood now that she had been mid-sentence. She told Sarael first, not because she planned to, because Sarael came in with breakfast, took one look at her face, and said with the quiet certainty of someone who has waited a long time for a conversation, "Tell me." So she did. Sarael listened without interrupting. "I suspected," she said when it was done. The way the court reacted, the fire, the flowers, the way he reacted, he recognized something he didn't understand. He's been walking into rooms where you are and standing very still. Sarael said, "He thinks people don't notice. People notice." Maren pressed her hands flat against her knees. "I have to tell him, yes." He thought he was learning a mortal stranger. He was actually coming home, Sarael said, in his own way, or repeating a pattern. Is there a difference? Maren looked at her. That's not a simple question. No, Sarael agreed. It isn't. She found him in the eastern balcony at dawn, as she'd known she would. He had the book, the letters, Ava's letters, her great however many grandmother's letters, open in his lap, and he was not reading. He was looking at the dawnwood in the distance, that specific quality of not seeing that means someone is looking inward. He heard her come. He always heard her come. He closed the book. She sat down on the bench across from him, which put them closer than they usually allowed, and she looked at him for a moment, and then she said, "I know about Ava." His stillness changed quality, like a body of water when something disturbs the surface. The appearance of calm remains, but underneath, everything is moving. "The Queen told you?" he said. "Not a question. Some of it." She paused. "The rest, I've been filling in." She looked at the book in his hands. "You read her letters every morning." He looked down at the cover, then, with a care that broke something in her, he set it aside. "She chose to leave," he said. "She said that she wanted to know what a mortal life felt like from the inside, not from beside one, not witnessing one. Inside it, finite, bounded." He paused. "I told her I understood I didn't. For 50 years, I told myself I did. And then she died, and I understood that there is a difference between comprehending a concept and surviving it. She died in her sleep," he said. "An old woman, at the end of a long life that she said in her last letter had been exactly what she asked for." He paused. "She was happy. I know she was happy." That did not make the grief smaller. Maren looked at his hands. "The book. The morning light on the dawnwood, a Calendra," she said. His name in her mouth was still new, still required a certain deliberateness. "The Queen told me something else." He waited. "She told me what I am," Maren said. "Not who, what. The blood I carry, where it comes from." Silence. "Ava," she said, "was the first daughter of House Aventh. She came here and she left, and she built something in the mortal world, and generations later her blood, diluted, changed, almost gone but not gone, produced me." She watched him. "The woman you loved is my ancestor. The line you chose without knowing why you chose it. You chose it because some part of you recognized something you thought you'd lost." She watched him understand. It moved through him the way weather moves, not all at once but in stages. The way a storm changes the quality of air before it arrives. She watched him put it together, watched the meaning settle. "I didn't know," he said. His voice was very quiet. "I know you didn't. The choice, the binding, choosing your family line. It wasn't." "I know," she said again. He stood. He moved to the railing and put both hands on it and looked at the forest, and she let him. Because some realizations need space around them, need air, need a moment where nobody is watching too closely. Then he said, still with his back to her, "What does it mean to you that I chose you, not knowing that I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Part of me wonders if you'll always see her when you look at me. If I'm a door you've walked through before, and this feels like coming home because it is home. Because I'm made of someone you already loved." She paused. "And part of me thinks that maybe coming home is different from staying in the past. That recognizing something doesn't have to mean replacing it." He turned. He looked at her with his face open in the way it almost never was. The careful composure down. The centuries of managed expression set aside. And what was underneath was not what she expected. She had expected grief. She had expected the particular pain of someone confronting an old wound. What she saw was something rawer and harder to name. "You are not her," he said. "You are not her at all. The blood is there. I feel it now that I know. And I should have felt it sooner. I should have." He stopped. "But the person you are is yours. Your questions, your honesty, your insistence on answering what was actually asked. The way you went straight to the thing I was avoiding and looked at it without flinching." He paused. "I did not feel this because of blood. I felt this because of you." Maren held that very carefully. "But I am still mortal," she said. "Even knowing what I carry." I still, yes, he said. You still. The old answer. The one that meant you will end and I will not. The one that had sat between them like a stone since the library. And you are still choosing this, she said. Not an accusation, a question. I am still choosing this, he said. Not without difficulty. With it. Openly, with full knowledge of the weight. Then I need you to understand something. She stood. She was shorter than him, considerably, and she didn't let that be a thing she compensated for. She stood at her full height and looked at him directly. I did not come here to be the second version of something you lost. I did not come here to resolve someone else's grief. I came because I was asked, and because I didn't know I had a choice, and then, slowly, because I found that I wanted to stay. She let that land. I am not Ava, she said. I am the sea she named me for. Different water, different shore. And if you choose me, if we do this, I need it to be because I am a person you want to know, not because I am a shape that fits a space you've been missing. She paused. Can you tell the difference? He looked at her for a long time. 300 years ago, he said slowly, I would have said that love was something that happened to you, something you survived or didn't. He paused. Now I think it's something you choose every morning, knowing the cost, knowing that it ends, choosing anyway because the alternative, the long, unbothered immortal life, the careful non-attachment, is its own kind of dying. He paused. I see you, Maren. Not a ghost, not a repetition. I see you. The pine lily in the garden below bloomed without wind, in the gold of the early light. Grief flowers that bloomed for reasons that turned out to be more complicated than grief alone. Because grief and love and home were not separate things, had never been separate, had always been the same country viewed from different angles. She took one step. He didn't move, but something about the way he was standing changed, the way a person changes when they stop holding themselves back. All right, she said. Then ask me a better question. And for the first time since she had arrived in the eternal court, for the first time in what she suspected had been a very long time, he smiled. A real one. Unguarded. Enormous. Maren, he said, will you stay? Not will you fulfill the binding. Not will you honor the accord. Not the obligation question that treated her as a solution. Will you stay? As if she were a person with preferences. She felt 23 years of making herself small gather up behind her. Yes, she said, I'll stay. Below, the garden bloomed. The fire in the great hearth, dark since the morning she arrived, caught, not with a spark, with a held breath finally released. Gold light flooded the eastern hall, and in the dawnwood, the birds that had been quiet since her arrival began, one by one, to sing. She did not become elven. She remained what she had always been, a mortal woman with more time than most, carrying in her blood the faint trace of people who had loved enormously in both directions, and found that the difference was less important than the choosing. She remained curious. She remained honest. She read in the library until the light failed, and Kalindra, patient, precise, still learning what it meant to want something specific, would come and sit across from her and not leave until she was ready. They were not a love story from legend. They were something smaller and stranger and more real than that. Two people given to each other without consent, who found unexpectedly, and somewhat against their better judgment, that they wanted to stay. The fire stayed lit. The pine lila kept their color, not because the grief was gone, but because it had found somewhere to go. Thank you for listening to another story from Elf Stories. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your comment below, and tell me, what kind of tale would you like to hear next?